Oh, okay. Now let me get this big white patch off Nancy's face. Okay. It was a big sign across Nancy's face. I cleared it. Okay. Good morning again, everybody.
Good
I'm
morning.
gonna be your facilitator this morning. So good to see everybody. Starting off with the slogan of Erace. Erace is a slogan of the group. Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating fellow human beings of all colors with love and respect. So, Erace is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in the acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be allowed. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. So, let me read the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that what we know as the United States is the traditional territory of the indigenous people, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named. Many of our group today on the lands of the Tonkawan, Lipan, Apache, and Comanche in Austin, the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Lenape and Piscataway in Maryland, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, and the Catawba and Mojave in Riverside County, California. And we thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. So, everybody, hopefully some more folks are going to join us. But according to the setup on my screen, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. So, starting with Phyllis.
Good morning, I'm Phyllis. I'm in New Orleans and I've been coming to Erace since 2008.
And Beatrice.
Hi, good morning. I'm Beatrice in East Point, Georgia, which is right outside Atlanta, like Metairie and New Orleans. And I have been I've been doing Erace since about 1993 when I lived in New Orleans. Delighted to see everybody.
Thank you, Beatrice and Phyllis. If I didn't say thank you, Phyllis. Larry.
Good morning, I'm Larry, and I started with Erace somewhere back in the mid-90s. And I remember the days we used to go to the, I think, Gentile Library, and used to have so many people, we'd break out into groups and then come back. But good morning, glad to be here.
Thank you, Larry. I think it was Broadmoor. That's the
Broadmoor,
first,
yeah.
That's the first meeting that I attended. At the Broadmoor branch.
That's right.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Moore. I have been attending Erace since June of 2007, and I'm in New Orleans.
All right, thank you, Nancy. And we have Nicole Castillo.
Hi, yeah, I'm Nicole and I'm in Atlanta and I've been with Erace for like 3 months and it's been amazing.
Oh, so glad that you joined us again, Nicole. Thank you. Marla.
Hey, good morning. I'm Marla. I've been attending Erace since I think around 2019-ish, and I'm in Metairie, right outside of New Orleans.
Okay, good to see you, Marla. Glenn.
My name is Glenn Abdullah. Been with Erace since 1994. Looking forward to the meeting this morning.
Thanks, Glenn. Now, someone has left my screen. Was Marva on the Zoom call? This. Okay, there's Teresa, who's connecting. And as I said, was Marva here?
No.
No, okay. I don't know why I thought
Marva texted us and said she's not coming.
Oh, okay. All right, Teresa?
Whoa, hello. Sorry, I'm
Hey.
joining in late. My shopping took longer than I thought it was going to be. But anyway, this is Teresa in Fayetteville. Are we still introducing ourselves? I don't know. I feel like
Well,
I'm
now
just
we
kind of
know you just
jumping
introduced yourself.
in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else? I'm scanning the screen. Okay. Thanks, Teresa. Good you're here.
You're
So
welcome.
every everybody hear the rules. I'm keeping a list of names. You raise one finger and be sure to wiggle it like this so your finger won't blend into the background. I'll put your name on the list when you raise your finger. We speak in order. You have 2 minutes. If you have a clarifying question, after somebody makes a comment, you raise 2 fingers. This is not the opportunity to give your opinion, because if you want to give your opinion or participate in a discussion, you raise the 1 finger and I'll put you on the list. So 2 fingers. So we're not going to go out of order when you want to ask a clarifying question. And if you didn't understand, you say, "Can you clarify what you meant by?" And then the person will be able to clarify his or her statement. The questions are not to further the opinions of the person who's asking the question. The clarifying questions don't have to be a monologue, or questions that don't qualify as clarifying will not be allowed, and the person can go on the list. So only 2 people are allowed to ask the clarifying question per speaker. So why did I choose this article? Usually we're speaking generally about things that affect adults, but I was thinking about my grandchildren who are under 16 years of age, and how today's discussion, which is about how racism and discrimination against children is worldwide. So I thought that would be an interesting topic for us to discuss, whether we have children or not. Most of us see children just about every day. Maybe we don't have children, some of us, maybe we do. But racism does have a very serious impact on children. So this is why I brought the topic: how racism impacts children around the world. So with that being said, let me grab my little notebook paper here so I can start writing names. The list is open. All right, Larry. Nicole, did you raise your finger? I see a hand. No? Okay, Larry, you're the first on the list.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
It's 2 things that dominated my thoughts as I read this article. I'll mention the first one and hold the other one till later on. But if there were 2 gang members and one gang member shot another gang member, and then the one who did the shooting ran home to his household. In his household, there are men, women, and 10 children. And then the members of the other gang found the household and just went to the household and shot up and killed everybody in the household. That would be a worse deed than what happened before. So I say that to say that in order for us to talk about racism and discrimination and other things against children, we must keep the Palestinian children on the front burner and not be fearful to criticize the Jews as indiscriminately killing the Palestinians and therefore becoming as worse as Hamas. And so we don't want to lose our moral authority in discussing matters concerning children, and yet we don't criticize the Jews in Israel as we ought to. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Okay, Phyllis just raised her finger a second ago. Phyllis?
So I agree with what Larry said about the children and all the men and women suffering right now in Gaza and the West Bank. However, I think we need to separate Israel from all of Judaism. All Jewish people are not supporting what Israel is doing. There have been a lot of protests in the United States led by Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now, which are Jewish organizations that do not support Israel. So I think we have to remember there is a Western Christian tendency to be anti-Semitic towards Jewish people and to use the Bible to do it. And we have to be really cautious of the language we use, because I wouldn't want to be conflated with a Christian Zionist. And I'm sure there's lots of Jewish people that don't want to be conflated with the Israeli Zionists. So let's just be aware of our language and not harm other people when we talk about this issue. And free Palestine.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis, for giving us a reminder of how we can approach this topic. Did I miss anybody? Okay, there was something that I wanted to sort of trigger a response. I wrote the notes, but I have several stuff spread out here on the topic. If anybody wants to talk about any area that you yourself might be familiar with, be it education or health, access to government resources, Larry again, and then Beatrice.
Yeah, I just want to, clear up something, relative to anti-Semitism. And we use that term too loosely, as if it is just morally wrong to call Israel, to call the Jews, or however we put it, the Jews or the Israel, if it's like it's just morally wrong to call them out because they are a protected class above all other classes in the world because they suffered through the Holocaust. African ancestors suffered through the Middle Passage, where millions were lost coming over the Atlantic Ocean. And we must also bear in mind that, in 1948, when the modern state of Israel was created, that whole area of Palestine had a multitude of different people, and they were all called Semitic people, referring primarily to the language of that nation. Now, how the Jews came up to adopt the term Semitic as if it applies to them only is wrong. So I don't think we need to be fearful of criticizing those who are wrong, no matter who they are.
Thanks, Larry. Phyllis, Beatrice, and then let's see, Phyllis. Okay, Beatrice.
Yeah, I found it, looking at the article, I found it disturbing to know that some children are not registered at birth. It would seem that that would just be a normal process. And because that has some founding, their ability to get basic human rights is affected by this. I found extremely disturbing. A couple of times I've had to use my birth certificate for something. I just had to have my passport renewed, and I looked at that old birth certificate where my parents registered my birth is so old that it has COL for colored on it. They had the race of my parents on my birth certificate. But I just reading that the analysis of data on the rate of children registered at birth, That's really disturbing that a child would come into this world and not have an official registration of its birth. It's very concerning, especially as that relates to the possibility of their gaining rights. The discussion of what's happening on the West Bank and Gaza is so fraught and so concerning to me and heartbreaking to see what is going on, especially with the hospitals. And it just, and you look at what you would say is moral consistency and that moral clarity. Moral clarity is that you see what is going on, and October 7th might have been, it is a horrible circumstance to have occurred, but moral clarity or consistency lets us see that what is now going on is worse. And I think Larry's example of somebody coming in the house, the gang member coming in the house, I think also the term anti-Semitic is just thrown around and people just get all torn up in pieces when you can criticize a government. Netanyahu is a bellicose person who wants to continue war to maintain, I think, here's his position. He has people in his cabinet who have spoken, called Palestinians, animals. I mean, the whole process, 1948, when the state was created, it's just so much in what's going on in terms of history and what's going on now. But it is heartbreaking when you see that there's not enough fuel for incubators, and you've got babies dying. So it just breaks your heart, but it drives you crazy when people are not, I think, are not able to see that we can say something is wrong and not saying that a people are wrong or that we are against a certain group of people. So it is just disturbing. But for me, the main thing here in this article, one of the main things had to do with the registration of birth. My goodness.
Thank you, Beatrice. Teresa, is your hand up?
Yes, it is, because I don't want to be on camera, so I just wanted
all
to
right,
do
okay.
that.
You're
I
at
just
the
wanted to be on
upper.
the list. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
I have your name now. Thank you,
Thank you.
Beatrice. Phyllis.
Put me on the list.
All right, Glenn. Phyllis.
So one of the things that this article brought up in my mind is trauma and how it has long-lasting effects on people into adulthood. And in terms of, learning, health, people have health issues well into adulthood that possibly shorten their lives because of trauma they experienced as a child. And I think the idea that where or to whom a child is born affects their whole life. They are denied certain things. They don't have access to certain things. I mean, I go back to the beginning of the situation in Gaza when Jamie Lee Curtis posted the picture of the Palestinian kids, but she didn't know the difference between a Palestinian kid and an Israeli kid. And I'm like, you can tell that those children are not well nourished in the picture. If you zoomed in, you would see the signs in the background have Arabic writing on them. I mean, it was just hugely stupid. And I don't doubt that any children in Israel, I'm sure there are children in Israel who have trauma, whether from October 7th or before. But I follow a lot of Jewish, mainly women, on social media who talk about how they overcame their sort of, indoctrination into Zionism. And when they knew more, they realized how sort of, honestly, one of them said she'd been lied to her whole life. And I think that trauma can be overcome if people are given the chance. And one thing is, if Palestinians survive this, which I hope they do, I don't see them being a people who would repeat this onto somebody else, whether it be Israelis or anybody else, because basically the Palestinians are stand-in for the Nazi Germans. And again, we have to be really specific to criticize a government and its people who are running it, and not a whole religious and ethnic group of people, many of whom also do not support that government. So let's just, try to have some compassion. Thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis. All right, Teresa.
I was hoping you'd call on me before I started cooking. Thank you. When I read this article, I was a teacher for over 20 years around the world. And one thing, and I know Beatrice is also an educator, I'm not sure who else on the call is, but whenever I would say oppressed group of people, part of their oppression is not being seen as human beings. And basically what society wants to do with those people is to turn them into living machines so they can squeeze out the most productivity out of them. And one of the things that does that, it not just erases your humanity, but also your humanness. And so the fact that they don't, some kids don't get registered with a birth certificate, as if, this is just really a machine. But when you're looking at education, one of the things that I wrestled with is that outside the States is that there's this idea that, there's no use or need to educate girls. All they're going to do is get married, have children, whatever. And as far as education is concerned, I remember hearing some people talk about, not finding a good maid, essentially a cleaning woman or whatever. And one woman said to another, well, if she were any smarter, she wouldn't be your maid. And I even suggested, well, maybe it's a management problem. Walking in her educational level, you need to train someone. Don't just expect that, she's just going to walk in, know what you want and how you want it and whatever. But when it comes to people being shortchanged, specifically in education, not everybody views that the person who's cleaning their toilet needs to understand calculus, or that they even need to be literate or harvest their mind. So that's already someone making the assumption that regardless of how intelligent someone naturally is, you're not going to nurture their minds if all you want them to do is menial tasks. You've already given them that pigeonholed of, this is all you're going to be to me in life. And I saw that a lot you see it in the States, even though we try to hide it, but I always taught in public schools, proudly so. I always wanted to teach where, it's majority and minority. And if society has deemed you not of the worthy ones, you're not college bound. You hear that a lot. When the college bound kids mess up, oh, we have to save them because they're college bound. And I'm one of the people or the teachers who were like, they all can be college bound. They all can be. But when, for whatever reason, you just dismiss that these human beings are never going to be anything, that's when you see how just carte blanche, they justify by whatever bias they believe, nope, it's not worth nurturing these kids. I'm sure I'm over my 2 minutes, but that was my takeaway from this article.
Thank you, Teresa.
Just reminded me of that. You're welcome.
I didn't want to interrupt you. I guess it's my bias as a former educator too. Well, I still am, because I was doing literacy. I am doing literacy at my church with adults. No more little kids or young children. So Teresa, thanks a lot. Glenn, and the list is open. Larry and Nicole. I have Larry and Nicole. Anyone else? Okay. Glenn?
Okay, yeah. To be mistreated, you don't have to be of another race. You can be of the same race and you have different within that race. You have different levels. You could be an Indian, and they will call certain Indians untouchables, and they will be they'll look the same as the people who think themselves better, but they put people in certain classes. We had a woman that was from Japan, and she didn't want to go back to Japan. She wanted to stay in the United States because she was going to be treated different because of that particular class of people she came from in Japan. So so it's not just racism. It could be class. Just wanted to bring that point out.
Okay, Glenn. Thank you. Larry?
Yes. One thing the article points out on that first page down at the bottom, where it says, for example, in disciplinary policies in the United States, Black children are almost 4 times more likely to receive out of school suspensions than white children, and more than twice as likely to face school related arrests, the report notes. That kind of always disturbs me, and even more so lately, when I always see Black children, not any other children, being measured against the standards of white children or white people. And, instead of focusing on the fact that Black children may be 4 times more likely to receive out of school suspensions, focus on the reason why they're receiving out of school suspensions rather than comparing them with white children. I think that's kind of a false narrative, as if we put this, we put white as the epitome of excellency, and all Blacks got to be compared with white people instead of being compared with standards of excellency and what's right. Thank you.
All right, Larry, thank you. All right, let's see. Nicole? Yes, Nicole?
Yes. I guess I want to make a comment on both of the last two comments. I think the system, like the white system, holds Black children back on purpose. And I think that based on Teresa's point, everyone deserves to cultivate their minds, and the world would be far less violent if that was so. But unfortunately, things are not that way. And this is the consequence that a lot of Black children are facing being in the school system.
All right, Nicole. Thank you. All right. Beatrice, I see your finger. Anyone else? All right. Beatrice?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I recall when I was
Marla.
an assistant principal at a predominantly European American school. There were African American children within that population. This was in maybe Chevy Chase, Maryland, I believe. But at any rate, I observed that particularly white teachers were more likely to see African American boys in their playful, maybe even silly behavior as being aggressive, as being the culture, the lack of understanding of African American culture often led European American teachers to label the behavior of African American children as aggressive, against the rules, beyond the scope of what was expected. And it had to do with culture. It had to do with lack of understanding. And it often, if I would not intervene, it would result in a punishment that was beyond what was required, and a punishment or a consequence that would not have been given to a white child doing the same behavior. And it's not a matter of comparison. And I understand Larry's point of view, and I'm not disrespecting or rejecting it, but all through when you talk about school to prison pipeline, it occurs because the behaviors of African American children are frequently more seriously punished and result in expulsion, suspension, and consequences that separate them from the community and begin to destroy their educational lives. And by doing that, destroying their opportunities for moving forward. And so it has been documented. It is not a matter of comparison so much as it is data points that are true, that African American children are more severely punished, more likely to be expelled. And it is for behaviors for which I used to serve on with the juvenile court. The committee was, I don't remember, anyway, they'd have children come in to juvenile court, and we would look at their behaviors and make judgments on what needed to happen. So frequently children who had done something that would not have required them to even come to juvenile court to talk with our committee, these children, this should have been handled at school, but it was an African-American kid, and the kid was expelled or suspended and sent to juvenile court for a conversation. It is true. The data points are accurate. It has not to do with comparison with white children. It is true that our children are more frequently, more severely punished and excluded from schools, and it results in the destruction of their opportunities to advance.
I got a question I want to ask.
Yeah.
Beatrice?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
When did this start? Did this start when you were going to school, or did this behavior start in the 60s?
When I was in elementary school, we were predominantly African American school. All of our students were segregated schools, and I remember in my whole elementary school life, maybe one or two kids that were ever even expelled or suspended. The behaviors, it was a community where people were nurtured. And so I just, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question accurately. Glenn, I hope that's helpful. Did that make sense?
Well, I'll just put me on the list. I'll explain myself better.
All right. Okay. Sorry. I did best I could.
All right. I have you, Glenn. Thanks, Beatrice. Now, Marla?
Yes. Wow, Beatrice, I just wanted to say something that you said that really stuck out to me as something that I want to go deeper on, is when you said the white, well, European American, presumably white teachers punishing disproportionately with specifically Black kids. And you said something about due to a total not understanding of culture. And wow, I'm gonna take that and really run with it and try to find some more reading and so forth on that. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it's something I've thought about. But when you said it, it really stuck out to me over everything that you said. So thank you for pointing that out, because again, like, we're stuck in our white bubble, and we don't really have appropriate understanding of folks who don't look like us, and we hold ourselves to this standard that we think is higher and better than all else. So that was great. I mean, not great, but great to point out. So thank you. The other thing I just wanted to say, kind of, that's on my mind, is that I think as a country specifically, we in the United States do not value our children, period. in many, many ways. And we show that time and again in how we allow gun violence to continue. Even, the other, like, Black educators have pointed out, wow, white people really aren't doing anything to save kids. And if we think that they're going to care about our kids,
I have it, Teresa.
they're not going to care about our kids, because they don't even care about their own children. Because we as white folks, we stand by while white kids are getting gunned down. So, we time and again show, in my humble opinion, in this country, that we value guns and money above all else, above children, above human lives, time and again. And the other thing that I just wanted to point out, I don't know if it was actually in the article or not, I can't recall, but the humanitarian crisis in Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and child labor in Congo, and how women and girls in particular are being, put into situations of tremendous abuse and servitude, and having to participate in survival sex, just to get food on the table, just to put our phones in our hands. So that's something that I think, with the Palestinian humanitarian crisis, has not necessarily been highlighted, and maybe we should continue to also talk about the DR. That's it. And Sudan also.
Thank you, Marla. Ironically, someone was in my home week before last from Nigeria, and he pointed out that he said they're focusing on the Hamas-Israeli crisis. He said, but there's a lot of upheaval in Sudan, and I'll mention that and you mentioned Congo, so I'm going to mention that in the final remarks. So thanks for bringing that up, just to give everybody a heads up of what's to come. So thanks again. Nancy.
Yes, I just wanted to piggyback on what Beatrice said about the Black children being treated differently, and particularly when they are in a predominantly white environment. I had to integrate a school, and I was the only Black girl in my class. And not only feeling isolated in that situation, because the other students wouldn't sit with me, they wouldn't play with me, they played tricks on me, they bullied me, they did a lot of things to that, as I got older, having kind of not really thought about that over years, not really until I came to Erace did those memories start coming back to me of what happened to me. Then I just kind of pushed them out of my mind. But specifically, I remember we had to line up, okay, to go anywhere. You had a bathroom time, you had lunch, you had everything, you had to line up, okay? And we all had assigned, they would line you up according to height. And so we all had our place in line. You knew that you stood behind this person and you stood in front of this person. They had assigned you where you're supposed to line up at. Well, one of the little girls jumped in front of me. Okay. She pushed me out the way and she jumped in front of me. So I pushed her back. And of course, a little scuffle ensued. But she pushed me first and jumped in front of me. But who got sent to the principal's office? Me. Those are the kinds of things that happen to Black children. I mean, it erodes your self-esteem because you think something is wrong with you for standing up for yourself. And that's all I was doing, was standing up for myself. Okay. But I was the one that got sent to the principal's office, which we're talking 30 years later, just about. I watched, my children kind of go through the same thing, and I would tell them, you stand up for yourself. Okay. Always stand up for yourself. Oh, what, you gonna get in trouble? I said, you let me take care of that. I will take care of that. But you stand up for yourself. Okay. No matter what, I don't care who it is, I don't care what it is. You stand up for yourself. And yes, I mean, 30 years later, I'm going through the same fight. I was going through the same fight for my children. just because when they would do things like what white children did, they would get into trouble. They would get sent to the principal's office. I'd get these notes about their misbehaving, they're doing this, they're doing that. And when I'm like, no, I seriously had to go to war with the Virginia Beach public school system over the same things that happened 30 years before. I just wanted to share that and see if that shed any light on how it makes children feel
It did.
and
It
affects them
does.
through their entire life.
It does. Says it in the article too. It really does. Thanks, Nancy. So we have Glenn and Teresa. Anybody else? Please feel free to get in on this discussion. So Glenn, you're up.
Okay, the way I framed the question to Beatrice, that's the best answer she could give, the way I framed it. But what I really trying to get across is this. Uh, when I remember coming up in elementary school, uh, the parents work with the school teacher. If a child is being unruly, the parent would come there and beat the child it will whip her own child in the hallway. You know, we can hear him out there screaming and howling. Uh, so I mean, it was uh, they look. You're kind of taking my mind, all that shaking your head and all that body language. Uh, what what I'm saying is that we uh, our behavior once we didn't have parents like that anymore. Once we had children raising children, you know, little girls getting pregnant early, not ready, that haven't lived their own childhood, and not knowing how to raise a child, and so you begin to have parents that would ready to fight the school teacher, take the side of the child. So it is. I'm not gonna say all of it is with all of it is what Nancy said it is. It's not just that. You know, it just some of our behavior. It's just bad. And I drove a school bus, and I had to put some off the school boy. They couldn't ride because of their behavior. So that's what I want to bring up. Let's not cry. Everything is racist.
Glenn, who was shaking there? Was it me shaking my head with my what body language were you referring to?
Yeah,
Okay, Teresa.
I was talking about you. Yes.
Okay, so it was distracting.
Yeah, you're supposed to be neutral.
Well, maybe my head is so big I can't keep it still. So anyway, all right, Teresa.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well,
Okay, thank you. So
Teresa.
I wanted to answer the question too, when did it begin? I think it began during integration and maybe even before, but as far as punishing Black children, especially Black boys, more for than other children who do the same thing. Um, Anytime they don't want you there, they'll find a way for you not to be there. They'll find a way to get rid of you. And so even when schools were not integrated, oftentimes, and I did not realize this, I knew that the separate schools were disproportionately funded. What I did not realize, and I heard I listened to the Isabel Wilkerson's book Cast. I did not realize that they would purposely hire, like if they had the choice between two Black teachers, they would hire the ones who was either had less experience or less competent or whatever, because they didn't want the more competent of the two teachers to teach those Black children. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. And I haven't had it like I'm sure she did her research, but I was just thinking, wow, of all the resources you would purposely put in a less competent teacher for the Black children just so they wouldn't learn from the best Black teacher that they could have, but just under resources and everything. So again, when they don't want you there, they'll find a way to make it so that either you're going to have a less than experience or horrible and then blame you for the way that you were treated or the way you respond to that aggression, which any child would do. Any child would do. And but you get punished for that, and that you see in the I know many of you have often heard me say that when it's a white guy who gets charged with something or suspected of something, there's always this nuanced interpretation of the law. So I'm just amazed of how white male criminals or alleged criminals cannot be arrested because of this, that, and the other. And I think, boy, if he was a Black man, he would have been shot on sight. Just like I think it was last summer that couple were traveling and then the woman magically disappeared or whatever, and they were speculating. And I'm saying that he probably did it. And then they found him at his parents' home, but they couldn't arrest him. I said he would have been shot on scene. But there's always this nuanced interpretation, and it starts with school. It starts with the attitude of, oh, this is untouchable, we're not going to apply the rule. And just like Beatrice was saying, for something, you get two kids. Once you know the race of those two kids and you hear that they both did the same thing and they got different punishments, this is why I continue to play racism bingo, and I usually win. When I hear the story on the TV without even knowing the race of the person, and I find out, oh, somebody shot a bunch of people and the police arrested them alive, white. Because if they don't have to be armed to be Black and killed on the scene. So I'll leave that at that.
Thank you, Teresa. Three of my family members walked in unexpectedly, and they were talking real loud. They were not aware that I was on the Zoom call, so hopefully that wasn't too distracting. And I hope my head wasn't bobbing up and down too much and distracting
Well,
people.
I'll put it to you this way: nobody stops my rants. So as long as you can hear me, I'm gonna keep going. But thank you.
That's good. Thanks, Teresa. So with that being said, the list is open. Larry,
I think Phyllis put in a chat,
Beatrice.
why whipping won't save Black Americans. While it may not, many in my generation, born and raised in the 50s and 60s, we just came up off of spankings. Many of us, not all, but we came up off of spankings. And there's a difference between whipping, as in beating, and punishment to reward good behavior, and punishment to reward, or rewards to reward good behavior, and punishment to reward bad behavior, however that might be. But when we look at a lot of time, Black NFL players or football players or NBA players get arrested. They're charged with different things, and their pictures and names are in the newspapers. And sometimes, people respond, especially Black people, well, the white players are doing the same thing, but they're just not getting in the newspapers. And that's one of the examples. We're not comparing ourselves with white players. We're comparing ourselves with good character. And when we lose sight of character, we lose sight of this whole argument. And while white kids may not be coming up shooting kids in the street like you might see a lot of Black kids doing, They might be being trained to be raised up to make $1 at all costs. No matter whose rights you have to trample on and who you have to suppress to make the capitalist system work. And so there's bad on every side, there's good on every side. And one of the biggest arguments we lose from the get-go when we talk about children is that child that is in the mother's womb. When we don't protect that child, have no sense of protecting that child, then we lose the whole argument about fighting for children. We continue to fight for children, yes, but we lose a certain degree of moral foundation when we think that that is in the womb is just an exposable or disposable piece of flesh, and not have the same concern about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. All right, Beatrice?
Yeah, I was really concerned about this paragraph in the reading. Among the new findings, the report shows that children from marginalized ethnic and language and religious groups in an analysis of 22 countries lag far behind their peers in reading skills. And that is really concerning because, well, it goes on to say an average student 7 to 14 from the most advantaged groups are more than twice as likely to have foundational reading skills than those from the least advantaged groups. That is a real concerning statistic in the study, because lacking in foundational reading skills is an issue that will follow these children all their educational lives when they don't start off with the basic reading skills. And so what we have to do about that is to really work, is to really work. There's something new called the science of reading that Mississippi schools have been using with their children and have been having great success. Although we may not point to Mississippi as being leading in educational outcomes, that we just really have to grasp on to making sure that our children, whatever the process, whatever the program, that our children are reading. So many children do not come to school having had any kind of preschool experience. Their parents have not been able to, or been willing to, or able, whatever the reasons, to read to them, and they do not come, and they're not talked to and listened to, and their questions answered. Just a whole lot of things that don't happen at home that should have, or we wish would have, and for whatever reasons that the parents are struggling or whatever, that we really have to make it a great aim to get our children get literacy, early literacy going on for our children. There's some pediatricians' offices that have got books that are given to the children as they come into the pediatrician's office. This is just something that we really have to put our hearts, minds, and bodies to, so that our children are advancing as they should with literacy skills.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beatrice. Larry has a clarifying question. Unmute, Larry. You muted again. Okay.
I'm just going to leave myself off of mute. Okay. But yes, Beatrice, in regards to what you said, and I know it takes a village, but where does this primary responsibility lie? Is it within the home, within the family? And because there are dysfunctional homes, that these kids aren't reading where they should be?
I don't think this is a question. I think this is a statement.
It's a question. I think we make a dangerous mistake when we try to tell a person what's not a question. It's a question.
Okay, you're asking where does it lie?
To Beatrice
Ask the question, please. Yeah,
the question
Larry.
to Beatrice was, where does she think the problem lies?
Okay, I think that that it's a shared responsibility for everybody who is in touch with every child everywhere, that you are responsible for helping with literacy, and it happens in the home. I think if a child goes to a store with their parent and they you can read stuff, put stuff on the wall, it happens. It is the responsibility of everyone who touches this child to help with literacy. And so if we don't have what is required or needed in the homes for whatever reasons, then it certainly is the responsibility of people in school. As soon as that child walks in the door, there needs to be a sign that says door. It just begins. Early literacy is the responsibility of everybody who touches a child's life. I hope that kind of answers, Larry.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right. We have Phyllis. Then the list is open and it's 11:01 according to my time. So, Phyllis, you're up.
So what I put in the chat was a book by a African American woman named Stacey Patton. It's called Spare the Kids: Why Whooping Won't Save Black America. And she makes the point that the belief in the Black community that children have to be whooped, spanked, beaten with switches, whatever, comes from Black parents trying to keep their enslaved children safe and alive by keeping them from doing things that might get them killed by the slave owners. That is the point of her thesis. And every time she puts something on Facebook, people come in and they comment, well, I was whipped when I was a kid and I'm okay. And I'm like, y'all are not okay. You are traumatized and you probably passed it on to the generations that you created. And I know there's people who break those conditions and those traditions. And I hope that we can all become able to see that putting hands on a child and hurting them and leaving marks and bruises is not discipline. It is punishment. It is abuse. If you want to discipline a child, there's ways to do that without physically traumatizing them. So, whether it's by a state situation or like a government doing it to children, or I'm going to keep muting you, Glenn, because you're making noise. And we just have to realize they're little. They don't have fully formed brains. Not until I think early 20s do people have fully formed brains. So when you expect a child to do exactly what you tell them the first time you tell them, that is unrealistic. That is not how the child brain works. And also to remind people, a fetus is not a baby. Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Put me on the list.
Okay, Larry.
You got me on the list?
I have you, Glenn. Patience is very important. Nice quality to have.
But I think when he heard you call, I know I'm not your lawyer, Larry. I mean Glenn. But when Glenn heard you call Larry's name and then didn't call his, he might have thought you didn't have him. I'm just saying.
Okay.
That's what I thought. Just me.
Thank you.
You're welcome, baby.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Okay.
All right. Phyllis, thanks you for your comments. If I didn't say that, if I said it, I don't think you can thank a person too much. Glenn?
I thought it was Larry next. Okay, so I'm next, huh?
17 comes before 18.
All right, yeah.
Okay.
And don't forget to thank me for my comment when I'm finished. All right.
Lord have mercy.
What I wanted to say is this. You know, when the time that I was growing up, the society was helping with your outlooks on life, right and wrong. Back then, a soap opera was a soap opera. It really was cleaning you up. the We had the good guy and the evil guy. At the end of the picture, the evil guy was going to get it. He was not going to win. Here today, you be rooting for the bad guy. You be rooting for the guy to get away with the bank money, to shoot everybody up and get away with the millions of dollars. That's the way the movies are made today. So in my time, the biggest thing in my life was my father. You know, there was no competition for my mind through 24-hour TV. The TV only stayed on for a couple of hours. And it wasn't all of this stuff that confused you on what is right and what's wrong. So when I did something wrong, I knew I was wrong. But today, a child today, I wouldn't put my hands on a child today because they, they don't know right and wrong. There's so much confusion out here. What is right and what's wrong? What is true? They got your truth and my truth. There's so much confusion. So yeah, back then and there, it was you little modern psychologists don't even know what you're talking about. Y'all irrational. Y'all even rational. And that's my opinion.
Thank you, Glenn. Yes, there's three fingers. We have to be reminded that we have to be polite and respectful. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I think everyone up to this point has been very polite and respectful of each other's remarks. So I'd like to remind everyone,
I've been
and I
polite.
stress
I didn't call
everyone,
nobody out.
to be polite and respectful.
Marion, can I clarify why I put up my three fingers?
Yes, Phyllis,
Thank you.
if I didn't make
Put
it,
up my three fingers because you just called most of us irrational. And that is what you tend to do at the end of a lot of your statements, when you run out of any steam in your argument. Thank you.
and remember when the facilitator read the opening remarks, she said that personal attacks wouldn't be tolerated. So we're here talking about children, uh, little people or young people who are much younger than ourselves. And one of the reasons why, and I know I'm deviating a little bit, Larry, did you make your comment, Larry? I'm kind of discombobulated right now. Did you make your comment?
No, you didn't call on me yet.
All right, Larry, go ahead. Let's thank you, Phyllis, for clarifying that. Let's remember to what the facilitator said early on in the introductory remarks about being respectful, and let's not have any personal attacks. We're here talking about children. All right, Larry. I
Okay,
have papers all over my table, and I knocked them on the floor, so I'm a little off the charts right now. So Larry's the last person on the list, and it is 11:10. So right after this, you can start thinking about what your final comments would be in the wrap up. Larry.
All right, thank you. I noticed in your opening statement, you said we come to learn. Well, no, we come to learn and listen and not argue. But to that regard, we've got to be careful that we don't try to squash a person's emotion, because there are things that we talk about, subjects we talk about that can raise our emotions, and we don't want to misinterpret a person's emotions by thinking that they're getting out of bounds. But one thing I raised in my first comment, I want to go back and make reference to that, because things have effect on children from generations to generations. The modern state of Israel was founded in 1948. None of the Hamas people were living in 1948. If so, they would be 83 years old now. None of the Israeli soldiers were alive in 1948. So things are passed on from generations to generations, and what's happening to the children in Palestine now, it's going to be passed on from generation to generation, which means where would the end of this whole conflict come? And I just want to read an excerpt from a book that David Ben-Gurion made. And he was I think the first president, first prime minister of Israel back in 1948. He made this statement: if I were an Arab leader, I would never sign an agreement with Israel. It is normal. We have taken their country. It is true. God promised it to us. But how could that interest them? Our God is not theirs. There has been anti-Semitism, the Nazis, Hitler, Auschwitz, but was that their fault? They see but one thing: we have come and stolen their country. Why would they accept that? So this is the first prime minister of Israel admitting that the Jews took the land and they're occupying the land the same way we say in our opening racism statement that America is on occupied land, taken from the Native Americans. Same thing. And while it is said a fetus is not a baby, the white slave owner said the same thing about the Africans. They're not humans. They're just a piece of property to be bought and sold to the highest bidder. So you see where all of this comes from. There's a connection. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. It's 11:13. Is there anyone else who would like to say anything? If not, we can go around the discussion group and we can do our wrap up. Okay. Thanks, Larry. Again. So with that being said, we can start with our wrap up, and I'll go to the top of my screen and I see Phyllis. So we'll start with Phyllis and we'll go around and make our wrap up comments.
Thanks for this article. It's unfortunate that some people took this article and found something to argue against. It's kind of amazing to me. I appreciate some of y'all's comments. Some of y'all, I think, need to educate yourself more about science and the world. It's becoming more and more sad to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Phyllis. Larry, you're right next to me on the screen, so you're coming up again.
Thank you. And it is becoming more and more sad to me too. The respect we show towards life, and we don't want to see shooting on the streets. We don't want to see kids killing kids. But when you have folk in Congress who don't want to institute no gun control because they know as long as guns are floating around freely, they know who have a tendency to get those guns and who have a tendency to kill one another. The Black kids that are out there on the street today. So it is becoming more sad to me that we don't have more respect for human life that God created in the mother's womb. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Nancy?
It's an interesting article. I mean, well, it led to an interesting and discussion with varying opinions coming from a number of different perspectives. And I think that that's one thing that um, Erace, I believe, the point of the organization, as we say in the beginning, is to listen and to not argue and to have respect that somebody else may have a different opinion and a different perspective than you may have based on the experience that they have had throughout their life or what they have experienced or what environment they found themselves in, and to respect that as opposed to pushing and shoving and your opinion on someone who may be in a different position or in a different environment entirely from you that you cannot experience. Thank you for the article.
Thank you, Nancy. You're quite welcome. Beatrice?
Yes, thank you for the article. And I agree with Glenn that there's so many influences on young people that our parents, we didn't have. Our parents didn't have that kind of competition that is present now. Physical abuse, however, is, I think, not corrective for it, or consequences for misbehavior. And we have to always be careful that we model correct behavior, that children understand consequences, and that the consequences are proportional, and that we are always teaching. I just finished a book, very interesting book. A young woman interviewed people who were in their hundreds, really, because they were the children of people that had been enslaved. And many of them said that they did not use any corporal punishment on their children because they remembered what had happened to them when they were enslaved. And so they didn't do that. I just reminded that an acorn is not an oak tree, a fetus is not a baby. You wouldn't call a 12-year-old boy a man. And I think that we have to, I am always going to stand up for the reproductive rights of females and of pregnant people. And I just think we need to really be really careful about vocabulary, about how we use words and what those words mean. Thank you so much, Larry, for reading that information from David Ben Gurion. I mean, that is so, for me, it really was impressive and appreciated. And thanks for everybody, the conversation. Thanks for the article. And I'm so glad my elementary school classmate, I gave you some numbers, baby, so you could get on, you know.
Thank you, my dear. Sincerely appreciate it. All right, Marla?
Yeah, that was an interesting discussion today. I don't have anything else to add, except I hope that we can all continue to get in closer contact with our own humanity so we can see the humanity in everybody else. That's it.
Thanks, Marla. Nicole?
I guess I just want to say that what I'm kind of absorbing is that childhood trauma is a key player in how we respond to each other. And so healing childhood wounds is a lifelong process, and we can't forget that.
Thank you, Nicole. Phyllis?
I already went.
All right. Okay, you jumped around. Everybody switched on the screen again. Glenn?
Yes, I enjoyed the article. Not crazy about the moderator, but I enjoyed the article. And just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, uh, and also, uh, you know, when I said about these modern psychologists, I was talking about the woman who wrote the book, who wrote this article about, about, whipping the child because of slavery. You know, I was really talking. I wasn't talking to anybody in the particular group here. modern psychologist. I don't think nobody in here is a psychologist. And but sometimes, anyway, I agree with Larry. He ain't said this, but I'm gonna say it. Abortion is murder, and I'll end with that.
Thank you, Glenn. Teresa?
Hi, thank you. I really came prepared to talk about like how kids worldwide get gypped out of education because they are perceived wrongly so as being less than. And this conversation went wow around the world. I mean, the conversation itself went around the world. So, I mean, it was interesting to listen to. I feel like my little comments about advocating for all children, especially those, it's almost as if those who need the most resources are the ones that they want to, you know, beat out of the system or somehow get out of the system faster than the ones who don't really need the help, but who have the resources at home. But still, thank you for choosing this article.
You're very welcome, Teresa. So, is there anybody that I missed? Because you all have shifted again on the screen. Okay. So we have a few more minutes. I would like to say some things happen that for a reason, and I think that gentleman coming here to do some work here at the house, who was of Nigerian descent, and saying how there was so much focus on the Israel Hamas situation that perhaps he felt that other countries were being ignored. And then when you think about innocent, helpless children and how they're suffering, and this morning I dropped the phone on the floor and it bounced to a news article. You see, things happen for a reason. And it was saying how the article stated how almost 3,000 children on that Gaza Strip have been killed and some seriously injured, serious bodily injuries, poor little things, the arms being broken, skulls being fractured, being burned. And it's horrible to think that this is happening to children. They don't have any control over what the stupid adults are doing, and they're being seriously injured. So I want to thank everybody for their comments. They were genuinely appreciated by me. I'm so glad I've gotten to a point in my life where I know at my age, if I get all worked up and emotional, I'm going to do some damage, not just psychologically, but physically. The doctor told me a week or so ago that my heart rate is normal. He said it's just amazing because for years and years I had an irregular heartbeat. I was surprised I'm still here, but evidently, because of my belief system, I believe I'm here for a good reason. And I hope to some extent I'm using my life wisely. But I want to thank all of you for your comments, for being here. I thank you all for your patience too. And I'm looking forward to our next discussion, which would be in the first Saturday, right, Phyllis?
Yeah, do you want me to stop recording and do announcements?
Yes.